The future was getting here faster than we'd expected. And so we are entering an age where velocity, flexibility, and innovation matter more than decades-old qualifications or experience. Or so it seems. It is true that to take off, we need speed. But what is speed without direction? Moving fast is not the same as actually going somewhere. You can try to be swift and precise, make the right decision in no time, take immediate action where it matters, win the only race that counts. But the art of true velocity goes far beyond that. It is to always be ready. And more than a step ahead. To control the unknown. Anytime, anywhere. To predict, adapt, and evolve in many directions at once. You have to be infinite. That way, when the time is right, you will be everywhere first.
Ladies and gentlemen, please welcome Checkpoint's Chief Marketing Officer, Peter Alexander.
All right. We don't have to make too much noise. I know we're all a bit hungover. Did everyone have a good time at the party last night? Yeah? Yeah? Okay, good. Well, maybe I shouldn't make too much noise. All right, so day 2 agenda. It looks a lot like day 1 agenda in that we just have 2 main sessions in here in the morning, before and after the break. And then we have lunch, and then we go to breakouts in the afternoon. And then we don't come back in here at the end of the day. Our last presenter of this morning will be the winner of the 2020 competition, so I'll be introducing them. But otherwise, we've got a full agenda. We hope everyone's keen to share more ideas and learn more things about cybersecurity for the day. And, gradually keep drinking coffee and the hangover will fade. Well, I hope mine will at least. We did listen to the feedback, incidentally. I don't know if you noticed. On the first day, a lot of people said there was no coffee around. So now we have coffee all the time, particularly in the expo. So, okay, good. You see, we do take the feedback seriously. So yes, there's coffee all day, and we hope to see you out in the expo in between sessions. Apart from that, why don't we get things started for today? Thank you.
Our next speaker has always loved computers ever since his first Atari. He leads the development and delivery of Checkpoint's advanced services, including the Checkpoint Incident Response Team. Ladies and gentlemen, please welcome Dan Wiley.
Tacoma Bridge, Washington, opened only but this apparently sets up a rhythmic swinging of the bridge, which increases with each swing. Finally, the swinging road and the suspension cables give way and plunge into the water below. Fortunately, the only casualties were a car stalled on the bridge and a dog.
I don't know about you, but I would not want to be on that bridge when it collapsed, huh? When this bridge collapsed, it caused a significant uproar in the population. They were actually quite scared to ride on these bridges because they thought all of them would actually fail. This would actually be pretty disconcerting since these bridges are the only ways to really span a very large distance. And engineering really had to change their approach to be able to make the population convinced that these bridges were actually safe. And after this calamity, what actually occurred was we had new engineering disciplines actually emerge from this bridge. What we found very quickly was that when you have a closed deck on a bridge, it acts almost like a wing of an airplane, and it starts rhythmically moving. And there's a whole science and engineering specifically around aerodynamics and building dynamics, specifically around dealing with wind and oscillations and resonance. This was never in building engineering before 1940. After that, we saw many of these disciplines actually emerge. Now every single bridge is actually tested, regression tested, multiple tests in wind tunnels over and over and over again. We evolved. We changed our approach to how we actually engineer these structures going forward. Now the question is, have we actually learned from our past when it comes to these kind of threats? And the funny thing is, we kind of haven't. The foundation of the internet is actually pretty solid. We don't have a lot of threats around the OSI stack under layer 7. We really just anticipate it being there, and it's always available. And like the bridge foundation, it is solid and it works very well. But what doesn't work very well is the interplay between the application layer and people. And that's where we're going to concentrate our discussion today. What we find now is that this interplay between the application and the people layer is causing so much distress and so many issues that it's really starting to erode the confidence of the actual internet. Over and over again, we're questioning about social media and other components of the internet. And just like yesterday's conversation with the FBI agent, it really, truly is making it very, very difficult to trust the internet. Now, in 2019, we had some really interesting lessons that we learned based on some of these incidents that we had inside of the Checkpoint Incident Response Team. Now, the very first lesson that we learned in 2019 was management does not have a friggin' clue on how to deal with cyber. At all. Most managers are actually burying their heads in the sand when it comes to cyber threats. You would think actually that this would be different and that people have learned and management actually learned from these threats, but they actually have not. In multiple cases this last year, we have seen managers burying their heads to the fact that they actually need to deal with cyber threats. Particularly, small to medium-sized businesses in Europe, when we approached them during the incident to ask them, hey, where's your cybersecurity plan? What have you actually tested? Have you a vision around cyber? All of them said the same thing. We're okay. In the middle of the incident. The reality is they're really not prepared for the actual threat. We were actually asked to participate in multiple dialogues after an incident to help management prepare and get their environment to a place where they could actually respond and have a cyber architecture. We were asked to do virtual CISO functions because management really wasn't prepared in any of these cyber events. We also found that one of the things that management keeps on doing is actually trying to outsource the problem to other people. And by outsourcing it to third parties, they really truly don't understand the components related to cyber threats, and they anticipate that the third party is actually going to do the job, but in reality, what we're finding is that these third parties are struggling time and time and time again. Management is failing us. We need to make sure that we spend the time with management to understand cyber threats, how to actually plan for them, how to actually engineer for them, and to actually give them the ability to make some of these decisions. Now, one comment, if management isn't doing their job, I think it's time to look for a new job. Seriously. Now, The other side of the threat that we followed in 2019 was cloud. Now, you're all joking around, but cloud is not automatic security. You can't just move into the cloud and expect it just to magically work. There isn't fairy dust, there isn't unicorns. You really actually have to do a significant amount of work to get cloud security to work. Do not go to the cloud thinking you're going to have this magical world. It's actually a massive amount of engineering involved. And you can't just turn it on. Multiple customers, time and time again, would go into Office 365, for example, turn it on, move their email, and then think magically everything was right. Well, then 3 weeks later, we get a phone call, and they've been compromised. Multiple times in 2019. But the biggest threat in 2019 is the same threat that we've been dealing with for hundreds of years, it feels like, and that's email. I don't know about you, but I didn't realize that we were actually sending around 3 billion emails a day. 300 billion emails a day. That is a massive amount of email. What we also looked at from a statistic point of view is that 55% of the email is junk. And inside that junk are a lot of threats. And those threats are actually being targeted every single day to every single one in the room. Email is such a threat that almost all of the attacks that we actually handled had an email event in 2019. Now, email has many different versions of threats that we actually would cover, specifically things like phishing and spam and malware. But what's really interesting is that almost after 50 years of having a protocol, we're still dealing with the same threats that were available to email 50 years ago. So we actually have not dealt with any of this engineering debt when it comes to email threats in our society. And we're going to talk about one of these cases.
Ladies and gentlemen, the story you are about to see is true. The names have been changed to protect the innocent.
The case, business email compromise, resulting in fraudulent wire transactions. And the reason why I'm talking like this is if you actually watched a TV show in the 1940s, the announcer would talk just like this. I will change my voice. The target in this case was a financial institution, a hedge fund, actually in Tel Aviv, Israel. They called us and basically said, hey, Dan, we lost $1.5 million. We can't find it. Help us find it. So we actually worked with the customer and started identifying all of the threats that were associated with Office 365 and their environment. We got access to the Office 365 instance, and we started to see something really interesting. The first thing we noticed was that the attacker had placed email filters throughout the entire Office 365 infrastructure. And these email filters actually created a scenario where the attacker was actually manipulating the message flow, message content, and message delivery of all emails between multiple parties. And now what the attacker actually was able to do was construct a hierarchy where there was actually a full man-in-the-middle attack between multiple parties inside of the Office 365 instance. This is actually quite amazing. The attacker had broken into the 365 instance, created all these filters, and made sure that all the traffic flow was flowing in the way that he wanted to, so he could actually manipulate the dialogue between the two parties. This is actually amazing to watch, because you could see an email from the first party, the hedge fund, saying, hi, Bob, I'm going to start the transaction to give you money. And the other side would say, hey, that's great. Please send the money to this bank account. But what had actually occurred is the attacker had modified the email to say, nope, please send the email to my bank account in Jamaica, man. And what happened was the hedge fund then deposited the money to the bank in in Jamaica, and then once it hits the Jamaican email or the bank account, it then flows out to third-party banks. And this occurred multiple times. So then we went back and said, okay, let's look at how the attacker actually broke into the system, because we know now that the attacker had created these filters and these message flows and made sure that he had full control of the email. But how did he actually break in? It all started with a very simple email. Click here if you want to release your messages from the Office 365 email controls within the system. And what happened was the CEO and the CFO both clicked on the message to release their messages. And when they did that, they actually had to type in their credentials, and that's how the attacker actually stole the email credentials. What was also very interesting is then we created a full attack flow to really understand how the attacker operated. And we could see that it started with a phishing email, but the attacker actually spent weeks studying their victim to understand how they worked, what industry they were in, who their customers were. They really studied the victim. It's not just, a cursory look. Really studied and knew everything about the email conversations, the parties in the email, and made sure he fully understood all the components of the environment. The attacker then set up all their infrastructures by standing up lookalike domains and all of the email flow dynamics that would need to be created for this fraud. He would then inject himself into the individual message flow, and then he would steal the money. The funny thing we found after this case is that we found another 25 victims after this event, all stemming from this one hedge fund. It wasn't just one VC or one payment. It was actually multiple payments. And the attacker would then go to the next victim and the next victim and the next victim to do the same attack over and over and over again. This is a multi-billion-dollar industry that pays off handsomely. So if anyone needs a new job, just kidding, there's a lot of money to be made in these attacks. What's also very interesting is that these attacks are not decreasing. They're only increasing. Yesterday, I was in a one-on-one. We get an alert. We had an Office 365 breach while I was talking to a customer yesterday. We're now averaging 3 to 4 a week, and it's just ramping up even further. Now, what's really interesting to me is that we haven't really learned our lesson when it comes to email. We are still dealing with the same threats that we had 50 years ago. We really don't have a clear understanding of all the components between the human dynamic and email, and we're still struggling with how to actually prevent these email attacks. But there are some things that you can do today. Running the Checkpoint Infinity architecture will definitely give you a leg up. Turning on threat emulation and threat protection technologies gives you the opportunity to succeed. Multi-factor authentication is absolutely vital in any of these cloud attacks. And if you find yourself in a situation where you need assistance, the Checkpoint Incident Response Team is always available to you 24 hours a day, 7 days a week. With our partner ecosystem and our integration with the Checkpoint product suite, we are always here to assist you in your need. Thank you very much, and have a great day.